I will quickly introduce the bird diversity in Djibouti because I realize that since Djibouti is a quite small country, not much people know about even the existence of Djibouti, even in Africa. And so I think it's a good opportunity to present you some information about the country. And then I will go in more detail about the landbird migration and the work we did here in the field. So if it comes to Djibouti, the first question you might want to ask is how many bird species have been observed in Djibouti? And the answer to this question is so far, about 400 bird species have been reported, 410 if we want to be very precise, but this number will evolve in the future. And this number comes from the checklist of the birds of Djibouti that was recently published. It was about 48 species. And we can add two other species that were recently observed in the country, the African pygmy kingfisher and the white-browed sparrow weaver, both observed in the south of Djibouti, not far from the boundary with Ethiopia. And so we can divide the bird diversity into three main categories. The water birds, which will here they will be like herons, egret, flamingos, all kind of birds related to wetland ecosystem. Then we have the different raptor species, and here I include the diurnal raptors, but also the nocturnal bird of prey, and finally the group of land passerines and non-passerines. And to give you a overview about the bird diversity within these three categories, so about 34% of these 400 bird species are water birds, 12% are diurnal raptors, only 2% are nocturnal bird of prey, and half of the bird diversity of Djibouti are actually landbirds. If we look at the conservation status of these species, and according to the red list of the IUCN, this is how it's look like. So most of the bird species are least concerned, even though we'll see later if we talk about migratory bird species, we know that many of them are classified as concerned, but the global population are decreasing. Otherwise, we have 9 endangered species and 5 are critically endangered. Among them, the vulture, because most of the vulture species in Africa are in bad condition now. And we have one critically endangered species which have all our attention in the country because it's the Djibouti spearfowl. It's the only endemic species of Djibouti, and it's critically endangered. Otherwise, 74% of the water birds of Djibouti are listed in the Annex 2 of the African Eurasian Water Bird Agreement. If we look at the Eurasian African Migratory Land Bird Action Plan, about half of these land birds that have been reported in Djibouti are included in the Annex 3 of this action plan. Now, so Djibouti, it's a quite small country and it's mostly an arid country. And here I just wanted you to summarize the main habitats. Of course, we have quite a good diversity of habitat, but the most common one are the northern dry thorn savanna, also the Afrotropical hot shrub desert. Some regions, especially in altitude, are more, we have woodland savanna, some kind of moist mixed savanna. We have different wetland area also. And here I use the classification of the book Habitat of Africa. And to give you some example about this diversity, if we take a picture in the mountains, this is what you will get, some quite green and forested area. Then we have different wetlands with mangrove ecosystem. And inland, most of the country, it's pretty dry and open. And of course, this different kind of habitat will attract different species. Some are specialists or generalists. So if we take a look at the mountainous region where where most of the vegetation is, we'll find different species that can be, for most of them, only seen in this part of the country. And this is also home of the Djibouti spearfur, so the critically endangered species. And unfortunately, forested habitat has dramatically decreased over the decade, and that's why we are losing this endemic species because of habitat loss and fragmentation. Then, since Djibouti it's situated along the Red Sea, we have a lot of different wetland habitats, and it attracts many waterbird species, especially migratory waterbirds. And here I just do a quick list of the most important or noticeable wetland and what kind of species you can expect. We have only one big lake inland, which is shared with Ethiopia, which is the Lake Abe, where we will have a lot of flamingo, about like 1,000 greater flamingos are there. So it's quite an important wetland area. And otherwise, yeah, most of the country, it's like this picture on the top left, pretty dry country, but still we get interesting species such as the scissor-tailed kite, which is an intra-African migrant, vulnerable, and other very nice species such as the Arabian bustard. Now, if we want to have a quick look about what are the main areas in the country that will be of interest regarding bird and biodiversity, we could list first, there's a national park, just one in the country, the Day Forest National Park, which is the area where we have the endemic species. We have just one Ramsar site in the south east near the boundary with Somalia. Otherwise, we have 7 key biodiversity areas, which were previously named ABA, Important Bird Area. And so we have the mountainous area, the Goda and Mabla Mountains. We have the shoreline in the north, also connected with the island, the 7 broad islands, which are very important for waterbirds, but also for counting migration. Like if we do, for example, raptor count during migration, because this is where most of the birds that cross the Red Sea will pass, but I will talk about it later. Then we have like the Lake Abe in the south, and the Aserjo region. It's a low elevation mountainous region. This is where we will find, for example, the bear antelope, which is endemic to Djibouti and Somaliland mostly. And finally, the Doda Plain, which it's also quite interesting. We will find, for example, Arabian bustard, some ostrich there. And then we have protected area, 4 marine protected area, some islands, and also offshore protected area. And then we have currently 3 terrestrial protected area, which are managed by the Deccan Association. This is the association I work for. We have one at the Ramsar site, also inland the Jaelo and Asamo. And just to give you the information about where the main city, the Djibouti city, the capital is situated, it's here. So you can see that it's really close to the Ramsar site. Now, let's talk more about the migration in Djibouti. So where do they come from? Most of the migrant birds we observe in Djibouti, and where do they go? So first of all, just to introduce quickly, we can divide the world in a big biogeographical realm. And here, since we are in Africa, most of the migratory birds will originate from the Palearctic region or the Afrotropical region. So we will call them either Palearctic migrant or Afrotropical migrant. And these migratory bird species will fly along the way. And in our case, we could also like be more specific and say that Djibouti is situated along the West Asian East African flyway. And if we zoom to our region of Horn of Africa and the Red Sea, um, you see that actually Djibouti it's situated near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is a very important bottleneck for migration because this is one of the entry and exit points of Africa for the birds that are migrate in autumn. They will enter to Africa through Djibouti, but they will also in the spring go out to from Africa to their breeding ground in Eurasia through Djibouti. And this is how it looks like. And to give you some example about the species that follow these migratory routes, we could mention, for example, the Egyptian vulture. There have been a couple of studies that that reveal the migratory behavior of the species and where it goes. So several birds that were follow with trackers, and you can see on this figure this migratory behavior of the species, and especially you can see that in autumn, bird from the Georgia and Azerbaijan will move through Saudi Arabia and then cross in Djibouti. They will winter in Djibouti and Ethiopia and then come back in the spring along the Eritrea, Egypt, and then cross to go back to their breeding ground. And there were a couple of raptor counts done in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait on the Djibouti side. Not many of them, unfortunately, but it gives you some hints about how many birds can be observed. For example, if we take this counting that was done in October 1987, there were more than 200,000 birds that from 26 species that were counted there. So it's like a very nice place to observe the migration, especially raptor migration. So in Djibouti, we can also classify the birds, the migratory bird, depending on whether they are non-breeding visitors. So they will come to Djibouti and stay during the fresh season, for example, for a couple of months. They are wintering. This is the case of the Isabelline wheatear. We have breeding visitors, and here the most beautiful one is this white-throated eater. It's an intra-African migrant that comes in Djibouti in April and then will stay during the summer. And then since Djibouti is located along a main flyway, we will also observe a lot of passage migrants, so birds that are just passing through to Djibouti during autumn and spring migration. So the association, they can collaborate with Vogelwarte for a project that studied the stopover ecology of migrating birds in Africa. So this project is led by the migration unit team at Vogelwarte in Switzerland. And the aims of this project is to investigate the benefit and constraints of migration for birds, specifically the energetic, nutritional, and temporal aspect, and connect these factors to seasonal habitat condition at stopover sites in Africa. So this is a collaborative work through Africa, and some of them also that are attending to this webinar might be part of this project. And the data are collected in East Africa, but also in West Africa. Even there are some collaborators outside Africa. And we are collecting further sample for stable isotope analysis, but also fecal material to study the diet of migratory birds. And we also started to collect blood sample to measure the glucose and triglycerides of migratory birds. So why are we doing this work? Because unfortunately, we assist to a global decrease of migratory bird populations across the globe. And this is mostly due because of habitat degradation, habitat loss at the breeding site, the non-breeding site, but also at stopover sites. And this is caused by many factors. So it will depend on the which region you are, but it could be deforestation, industrial agriculture, wet land conversion, urbanization, pollution, invasive species, overgrazing, especially in the Sahelian zone, climate change also, and will impact differently whether we are in Africa or in Europe, the affect in the different way the birds. And overall, it will mean for bird less food, failure in breeding, but also increased mortality during migration. And we can add to mortality, increasing the unregulated hunting in some country. And so why study stopover is important? Because the bird that, for example, migrate through Europe in Africa to their non-breeding ground, they won't do it in a single flight. They will have to cross different environmental barrier, mountains, sea, desert, like the Sahara Desert, and they need to, at some point, make some stop at specific sites. And there they might this stopover will serve to rest for bird, also to feed, sorry, to find shade, especially in Sahara. It can bird can be sensible to overheating. This is also true in Djibouti. Hide from predator, or just wait for optimal weather condition for the migration. And then they will arrive to the non-breeding ground. And then for the pre-breeding migration in spring, they will come back to Europe, also using stopover sites. So what we are doing in Djibouti, we have ringing sites. The main ringing site, it's a Deccan shelter. It's within the Ramsar site. It's a complete protected area with fence. So no people can enter and walk freely in this area. So it's pretty convenient for us to put mistnet there. Also, we have a second site in Jalelo protected area. And we also conducted I would say like some breeding session in other sites just once, just to see what kind of bird species we will get there. And why we did that, it's because the idea was to try to catch bird in different kind of environment in Djibouti. So at the Deccan side, it's an acacia forest along the sea, so close to the sea. In Jalelo, it's more open habitat with grassland and few. Then in the Goda Mountain, so it's mountainous region, it's much more wooded there. And in the south, it is an agricultural field, but it also attracts many birds, especially migratory and wintering birds, because it's like they find a lot of insect, a lot of food in this kind of agricultural land. So we also wanted to try to catch there to see what species we will get. And so in Djibouti, I don't work alone. I have the chance to have collaborator that came to help me in the field. So each season, someone, even sometimes two people came in the field to help. And I'm very grateful for this. And regarding the data collection, so of course we identify the species, we ring, but we also collected different biometric measurements, and especially the tarsus length, wing length, head build, and muscle score and fat score. Plus we collected feathers and fecal material. Regarding the results so far, so we did 3 sessions in the spring in 2024, 2025, and 26, and 1 season in autumn in 2024. And so far, we could capture more than 800 birds. We did measurements. From these 800 birds, more than 700 were ringed. And this is the different kind of bird we ring according whether they are Palearctic migrant, resident bird, mixed. It means that when it's species where we have in Djibouti some population that are resident and some population are just migrant, like pass as migrant from other country, and 5 Afrotropical migrants. And we collected almost 600 feather sample and more than 200 fecal material that are sent to Vogavarti for the analysis. And now we'll talk more about the bird we ringed and what we learned so far from this species we ringed. So here you don't need to look at each and every species, but to have a brief overview, I put colors. So you have in red the resident, in gray the Palearctic migrant, in yellow, yes, yellow, sorry, the mixed species that are either migrant, I mean, both migrant and resident. And then you have in blue Afrotropical migrant. So if we look at the residents, the primary habitat, we get pretty different species affiliated with different kind of habitat, and this is also because we selected different rigging sites. And I was also curious about what was the primary habitat of the palearctic migrant we. And this is quite variable also. So I get this information from the bird base. It's a database that is freely available to download on the internet if you're interested about this to get this data for your species. Also, if we look at the primary diet of these birds, again, it's pretty different for the residents, the African species we have here. And for the Palearctic migrant, they are mostly they eat on invertebrate and some are omnivores. And again, this comes from the bird base, this huge database. Now, we'll just few species just to give you more interesting information. The first one is this white-throated eater, another tropical breeding visitor in Djibouti. And we were lucky to recapture one of our individual we ringed in 2024. We got it again at the same place in 2025. And it's quite nice data because it revealed that these birds, when it come back to Djibouti, the adult will go back to the exact same breeding ground in Djibouti. And this is important data because as you can see on the map, this species, which is wintering in like Central Africa, there's not much, it's not very widely distributed in Horn of Africa. It has some specific region in Ethiopia and Djibouti where it breed. So it's very important to get information about like at the individual level which site they select, and we are curious also to see. I mean, if we could also get data to where they winter, it could be very interesting. And another thing that could be interesting, since we get the species mostly in the spring, so we collected data about the species, about the physical condition when they arrive in Djibouti, but we don't have data yet about what are the physical condition, the physiological condition where they are about to leave and come back to their wintering ground. So we hope that during the next season in autumn, we'll collect some data of this bird before they leave Djibouti to see what are the strategy, if they get fat or not for their migration to Central Africa or not. So this is the kind of data we are looking for this species. And if you are someone that live in Central Africa, maybe if you are ringing there, maybe try to get them. We are curious about the data you could get on their wintering ground. Now, the case of mixed status, as I said, so the case where we have resident and non-breeding visitor in Djibouti, this is the Rufous scrub robin. And as you can see on the map, we have resident bird, but also not breeding individual. And I try to, when we are catching, to look at the plumage and see if we could find some different in terms of coloration, for example. And I mean, it's very difficult to see any difference in terms of plumage coloration, but one strategy that we could use to differentiate the resident bird and the migrant is to look at the molt, because in the spring we get few individual which has like completely fresh plumage, like the one in the left, and also at the same time some individual with very old feathers. And usually migratory bird species, they tend to have fresh plumage when they want to migrate, because it will be much more efficient for them to have nice and fresh flight feathers to migrate to long distance, to fly a long distance, than having a very bad condition plumage. Another thing that could help to differentiate migrant and resident scrub robin, it's to look at the mass and the wingland. So here in this graph, you have about 20, I think 22 individual, the data from 22 individuals from this spring season, so 2026. You have the mass in x-axis and the wingland, and also the fat score. So the fat score is correlated with the mass. But what is interesting here is that you have a positive relationship between the mass and wingland. And so this relationship disappear if, for example, you compare the mass against the tarsus length or the mass length. It only exists with the wing length. And this is something that is also known on other species. And why it is like that? It's because it has been observed in some species where you have also population that's migrate to different distance, that birds that do long migration or that migrate with higher speed, they tend to have a wing length that is higher than other individual that doesn't have the same behavior. So it's a kind of adaptation, because having a higher wing length, it's much more effective for long distance flight and fly with higher speed. And so this might be the case here. So it could be possible that actually these birds here are the resident and here are the migrants. And we hope that with the analysis of the isotope from the feathers we collected, we could see also the difference in the geographic region where the bird has molted. If we come back to this graph, you see a very large peak here in the Palearctic migrant group, and it's the Lanius coeruleus, so the red-backed shrike. And in Djibouti, we get a lot of them. It's probably the most common bird we ringed. And so why we get so many? And to answer this question, we have to look at the map and the migratory behavior of the species. So this is a species that will breed in Europe and Middle East mostly. And then it will winter in Southern Africa. And it's a species that migrate through East Africa. And there were some studies, mostly from Europe population, they put geolocator on the different population, one from Spain and one from Denmark. And what they observe is that they do a kind of loop. So during the autumn migration, they will fly to their wintering ground through South Sudan, for example, and then fly through their the non-breeding ground in Southern Africa. But then they will come back in the spring through Horn of Africa, and both populations did the same behavior. And we can see that there is a stopover that is not far from Djibouti. It's somewhere in Horn of Africa, Northeast Africa, I mean, northern Kenya and Ethiopia, so somewhere in this region. And if we look at the graph of eBird, it's when in Djibouti the people doing birding observe the species, you have this peak of observation during end of April and beginning of May, which is what we could expect according to the study that were done. But you see also there's a peak of occurrence of the species in autumn. And this is quite interesting because according to the study on the left, it seems that European population of red-backed shrike do not migrate through Djibouti in autumn, only in spring. So here, where this red-backed shrike come from during autumn, so the hypothesis could be that during the pre-breeding migration, we get both European and Asian red-backed shrike, so the one that breed more in Middle East. And during autumn, during the post-breeding migration, probably it's only the red-backed shrike from the Middle East region that pass through Djibouti. And this is something that could be that should be investigated. And one way to do it could be to catch them during autumn migration in Djibouti and check the feathers, collect the feathers, and see the eye-stop ratio if we can determine if they come from Asia rather than Europe. Another interesting thing with the redback shrike is the mass. And here on this graph, you have the mass of all the redback shrike we collected during the different year of catching. So in blue, it's 2024, yellow 2025, and red 2026 with the month in x-axis. And there are two interesting information we can get from this graph. If we look only on the pre-breeding migration during the spring, you can see that across the year, the mass of the redback shrike is pretty similar and it's quite high. It's most of them are above 35 gram. Even some reach like 40, let's say 42, 43. So it's quite high for redback shrike. If we see the reported mass range, usually the redback shrike are between 25 and 35. With some maximum above 40, but it's quite rare. And here you can see that all of the redback shrike we get are quite heavy. And one reason of that is because, as I mentioned previously, Djibouti is located just after the stopover of redback shrike during the spring migration. So actually, we get the redback shrike once they just leave the last stopover in Africa and they are about to do the final flight to the breeding ground. So they should be, if they should be in good condition. They should be ready to do the last big flight to their breeding ground. And this is why we get fat redback shrike actually. And another interesting thing is the second point is during the post-breeding migration, we got only one redback shrike, but you see that the mass of this redback shrike we got in October is completely different from the ones we get in spring. So when they come back, it seems that they don't have fat reserve. They are pretty light. And this is something also we need more data from the autumn migration of redback shrike to confirm this. But this is something we also observe in other species. So here, it's the common nightingale. It's not a very common bird we get in Djibouti. I mean, in our mistnet, we get in total just four, two during the autumn migration and two during the spring migration. But here you see the same pattern. So during spring migration, they are quite heavy. They are above 30 gram. And during autumn, they are like between 20, 25 grams. So it seems that they are in the same condition that the redback shrike when they come back. And this is something quite interesting. So overall, we need more data from the post-breeding migration because it seems that the birds that are coming back from Eurasia are in different conditions than the birds that leave Africa to go back to their breeding site, at least when they pass through Djibouti. And here are some mass data also from common species we ring in Djibouti during the spring. This is for the barred warbler. So you have the mean mass, the minimum and maximum mass we get, the number of birds, the mass range. It's from the book of Bird in Hand that has some range of mass. And for the barred warbler, you see that we are more or less in the middle in terms of mean range. And so the birds are not that heavy for the barred warbler during the spring, but it could be also because the strategy of migration comparing to the redback shrike is different. So this bird, we get them quite early during March until the beginning of April. Then there's no barred warbler. So they might migrate much earlier in the spring season. and they go less far than the red-backed shrike. So this is maybe why they don't need to be so fat when they leave Djibouti. Then we have the common reed warbler, and overall, this species, they were pretty fat actually. The same for the common white-throat, very fat. In general, we get 42 birds. Which is a good number, and you can see that the mean mass it's almost 20 gram. And if you compare to the mass range, it's actually they are extremely heavy. These birds, I'm not sure if we get common white-throat from Europe or it's just common white-throat going to Asia, but they are pretty heavy when they pass through Djibouti. The willow warbler also, it's pretty heavy. And finally, the garden warbler. So all these birds are just passage migrant. They do not, they will appear in Djibouti just for a couple of weeks. Only the willow warbler, I mean, this bird, you get them from March to late May. And so it's more wide, the range of time we get them. And it's probably because we get different population. And it is obvious when you see the plumage variation. So we might get different subspecies, different population that goes to different place in Eurasia. So we have the subspecies Trochilus, Acredula, and Yakutensis. And these birds, usually we do not rely on the plumage to determine the species because it's quite variable from the yellow to the dark gray. And for example, here you have two birds that are in terms of plumage pretty much the same, but on the left is the willow warbler, and on the right is the common chiffchaff, which is wintering in Djibouti. And just to give you also the data about the mass, it's around, when they are here, they are around 7 grams, so they are less fat than the willow warbler. But you can see that the plumage variation, like they are pretty similar, so we don't rely on plumage. And yeah, just to give you some example of other species we got the Icterian warbler, and this species is quite nice because when we got it last year for the first time. It was the first record for Djibouti. So this project also gave nice result for the country because some passage migrants were not documented for the country, even though it was known that this species might pass through Djibouti, but was never observed. So we did the first observation for the country. And here are other species that migrate exclusively through the Eastern Africa flyway. The river robert, thrush nightingale, also the concretes. We got one, and it's quite nice because it's pretty rare, I think, to get concretes along the flyway. So it's really nice to have also data from this species. And apart from the ringing activity and collected data, here we are, I'm also conducting some workshop and field training with the university here to promote ornithology and birding in Djibouti, because currently we lack of people that are good in recognizing birds and doing some monitoring. There is maybe two local people, 3 local people that are able to recognize bird species and collect data in the field. So it's not much. And this lack of people like with knowledge, it's a big problem when we need to, for example, count birds, do some water bird counting, or just count bird during migration. So there's not much activity regarding the monitoring of bird in Djibouti. And I think it's a pity because we are in an important location for the migration, not only on landbird, but raptors and water birds. So we should dedicate more effort in monitoring the population that are migrating or wintering in Djibouti. Also, last month it was the Bird Migration Day, and it was especially so the theme of the year was to every bird count and promote citizen science. And on this occasion, on the 20th of May, I did a public conference. It was for free, so everyone in town could attend to this conference where I talk about the birds that are migrating in Djibouti. And if you are interested about coming in Djibouti and do some birding, I could recommend the Bird of Horn of Africa as an English field guide and in French because it's a francophone country. There is a three volume about Bird of Djibouti that are in development right now. It's not published yet because the main author, Alain Laurent, is still working on it. And if you want, or if you know any institution that could support his work, because he's doing it on its own with some help, but it's like a personal project. But actually, there is no field guide in French about birds in Djibouti, which is a pity because this country is francophone, so people speak French, and there is no guide about birds in French for Djibouti. This is also why there is a problem of capacity of people interested about birds because there is no literature in French for them. So this guy is doing this a great work to document this and to prepare this book, but he lack of funding. Especially now, he is working on the last volume, the volume about passerine, and he's lacking of funding for to finish the book and to print. So if you know any institution that could help, it would be very appreciated. And thank you for your attention. And thank you for Vogelwarte, for the migration team that support this work. Thank you for Friday for Birds also. And a huge thank also for the team that came in the field, John Musina, Emily Jean-Pierre, Katarzyna Wosak, Sarah Oakele, and Benjamin Rothenbuhler, if I pronounce it correctly. And you can also support our work at the Djibouti. It's an NGO, Deccan Association in Djibouti. It's an NGO, so we don't have a subvention from the government. We just do conservation work by applying for on grant and we live also on eco-tourist activity, but we don't have much funding actually. And so if you also want to support our work, you can visit our website. You can also visit my website if you want to see some nice picture of birds. Thank you very much.